Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Part 6. Captain Silver. 28. In the enemy's camp. The red glare of the torch, lighting up the interior of the blockhouse, showed me the worst of my apprehensions realized. The pirates were in possession of the house and stores. There was the cask of cognac, there was the pork and bread, as before, and what tenfold increased my horror, not a sign of any prisoner. I could only judge that all had perished, and my heart smote me sorely that I had not been there to perish with them. There were 6 of the buccaneers, all told. Not another man was left alive. 5 of them were on their feet, flushed and swollen, suddenly called out of the first sleep of drunkenness. The 6th had only risen up upon his elbow. He was deadly pale, and the blood-stained bandage round his head told that he had recently been wounded, and still more recently dressed. I remembered the man who had been shot and had run back among the woods in the great attack, and doubted not that this was he. The parrot sat, preening her plumage, on Long John's shoulder. He himself, I thought, looked somewhat paler and more stern than I was used to. He still wore the fine broadcloth suit in which he had fulfilled his mission, but it was bitterly the worse for wear, daubed with clay and torn with the sharp briars of the wood.
"So," said he, "here's Jim Hawkins, shiver me timbers, dropped in like well, come, I take that friendly."
And thereupon he sat down across the brandy cask and began to fill a pipe.
"Give me a loan of the link, Dick,"
said he, and then, when he had a good light,
"That'll do, lad," he added. "Stick the glim in the wood heap, and you gentlemen, bring yourselves too. You needn't stand up for Mr. Hawkins. He'll excuse you, you may lay to that. And so, Jim," stopping the tobacco, "here you were, and quite a pleasant surprise for poor old John. I see you were smart when I first set my eyes on you, but this here gets away from me clean, it do."
To all this, as may be well supposed, I made no answer. They had set me with my back against the wall, and I stood there, looking Silver in the face, pluckily enough, I hope, to all outward appearance, but with black despair in my heart. Silver took a whiff or two of his pipe with great composure, and then ran on again.
"Now, you see, Jim, so be as you are here," says he. "I'll give you a piece of my mind. I've always liked you, I have, for a lad of spirit, and a picture of myself when I was young and handsome. I always wanted to join you and take your share, and die a gentleman, and now, my cock, you've got to. Captain Smollett's a fine seaman, as I'll own up to any day, but stiff on discipline. Duty is duty, says he, and right he is. Just you keep clear of the cap'n. The doctor himself is gone dead again you. Ungrateful scamp was what he said, and the short and the long of the whole story is about here. You can't go back to your own lot, for they won't have you. And without you start a 3rd ship's company all by yourself, which might be lonely, you have to join with Captain Silver."
So far, so good. My friends then were still alive, and though I partly believed the truth of Silver's statement, that the cabin party were incensed at me for desertion, I was more relieved than distressed by what I heard.
"I don't say nothing as to your being in our hands," continued Silver. "There you are, and you may lay to it. I'm all for argument. I'd never seen good to come out of threatening. If you like the service, well, you join, and if you don't, Jim, why, you're free to answer no. Free and welcome, shipmate, and if fair can be said by mortal seamen, shiver my sides."
Am I to answer, then?" I asked with a very tremulous voice. Through all this sneering talk, I was made to feel the threat of death that overhung me, and my cheeks burned, and my heart beat painfully in my breast.
"Lad," said Silver, "no one's a-pressing of you. Take your bearings. None of us won't hurry you, mate. Time goes so pleasant in your company, you see.
Well, says I, growing a bit bolder, if I'm to choose, I declare I have a right to know what's what, and why you're here, and where my friends are.
What's what?
Repeated one of the buccaneers in a deep growl.
Oh, he'd be a lucky one as no that. You'll perhaps batten down your hatches till you're spoke to, my friend,
cried Silver truculently to the speaker. And then, in his first gracious tones, he replied to me.
Yesterday morning, Mr. Hawkins, said he, in the dog watch, down come Dr. Livesey with a flag of truce. Says he, Captain Silver, you're sold out, ship's gone. Well, maybe we'd been taking a glass, and the song to help it round, I won't say no. Leastways, none of us had looked out. We looked out, and by thunder, the old ship was gone. I never seen a pack of fools look fishier, and you may lay to that, if I tells you that looked the fishiest. Well, says the doctor, let us bargain. We bargained, him and I, and here we are. Stores, brandy, blockhouse, the firewood you were thoughtful enough to cut, and in a manner of speaking, the whole blessed boat from Cross Tees to Kelson. As for them, they've tramped. I don't knows where they are.
He drew again quietly at his pipe.
At least you should take it into that head of yours, he went on, that you was included in the treaty. Here's the last word that was said. How many are ye, says I, to leave? 4, says he, 4 and one of us wounded. As for that boy, I don't know where he is, confound him, says he, nor do I much care. We're about sick of him. These was his words.
Is that all? I asked.
Well, it's all that you're to hear, my son, returned Silver.
And now I am to choose.
And now you are to choose, and you may lay to that, said Silver.
Well, said I, I'm not such a fool, but I know pretty well what I have to look for. Let the worst come to the worst, it's little I care. I've seen too many die since I fell in with you. But there's a thing or two I have to tell you, I said, and by this time I was quite excited. And the first is this. Here you are, in a bad way, ship lost, treasure lost, men lost, your whole business gone to wreck, and if you want to know who did it, it was I. I was in the apple barrel the night we sighted land, and I heard you, John, and you, Dick Johnson, and Hans, who's now at the bottom of the sea, and told you every word you said before the hour was out. And as for the schooner, it was I who cut her cable. And it was I that killed the men you had aboard of her. And it was I who brought her where you'll never see her more, not one of you. Laughs on my side. I've had the top of this business from the first. I no more fear you than I fear a fly. Kill me, if you please, or spare me. But one thing I'll say, no more. If you spare me, bygones are bygones, and when you fellows are in court for piracy, I'll save you all I can. It is for you to choose. Kill another and do yourselves no good, or spare me and keep a witness to save you from the gallows. I stopped, for I tell you I was out of breath, and to my wonder not a man of them moved, but all sat staring at me like as many sheep. And while they were still staring, I broke out again. And now, Mr. Silver, I said, I believe you're the best man here, and if things go to the worst, I take it kind of you to let the doctor know the way I took it.
I'll bear it in mind,
said Silver, with an accent so curious that I could not for the life of me decide whether he were laughing at my request or had been favorably affected by my courage.
I'll put one to that,
cried the old mahogany-faced seaman, Morgan by name, who I had seen in Long John's public house upon the quays of Bristol.
It was him that knowed Black Dog. Well, and see here, added the sea cook, I'll put another again to that, by thunder, for it was the same boy that faked the chart from Billy Bones. First and last, we've split upon Jim Hawkins.
Then here goes, said Morgan with an oath, and he sprang, drawing his knife as if he had been 20.
Avast there, cried Silver. "Who are you, Tom Morgan? Maybe you thought you was captain here, perhaps. By the powers, but I'll teach you better. Cross me and you'll go where many a good man's gone before you, first and last, these 30 year back, some to the yard arm, shivering me timbers, and some by the board, and all to feed the fishes. There's never a man looked me between the eyes and seen a good day afterwards, Tom Morgan, you may lay to that."
Morgan paused, but a hoarse murmur rose from the other. "Tom's right," said one. "I stood hazing long enough for one," added another. "I'll be hanged if I'll be hazed by you, John Silver."
"Did any of you gentlemen want to have it out with me?" roared Silver,
bending far forward from his position on the keg, with his pipe still glowing in his right hand.
"Put a name on what you're at. You ain't dumb, I reckon. Him that wants shall get it. Have I lived this many years, and a son of a rum-punching cock, his hat athwart my horse at the latter end of it? You know the way. You're all gentlemen of fortune by your account. Well, I'm ready. Take a cutlass, him that dares, and I'll see the colour of his inside, crutch and all, before that pipe's empty."
Not a man stirred. Not a man answered.
"That's your sort, is it?"
he added, returning his pipe to his mouth.
"Well, you're a gay lot to look at, anyway. Not much worth a fight. You ain't. Perhaps you can understand King George's English. I'm captain here by 'lection. I'm captain here because I'm the best man by a long sea mile. You won't fight, as gentlemen of fortune should, then, by thunder, you'll obey, and you may lay to it. I like that boy now. I never seen a better boy than that. He's more a man than any pair of rats of you in this here house, and what I say is this. Let me see him that'll lay a hand on it, that's what I say, and you may lay to it."
There was a long pause after this. I stood straight up against the wall, my heart still going like a sledgehammer, but with the ray of hope now shining in my bosom. Silver leant back against the wall, his arms crossed, his pipe in the corner of his mouth, as calm as though he had been in church. Yet his eye kept wandering furtively, and he kept the tail of it on his unruly followers. They, on their part, drew gradually together towards the far end of the blockhouse, and the low hiss of their whispering sounded in my ear continuously, like a stream. One after another they would look up, and the red light of the torch would fall for a second on their nervous faces, but it was not towards me. It was towards Silver that they turned their eyes.
"You seem to have a lot to say," remarked Silver, spitting far into the air. "Pipe up and let me hear it, or lay to."
"Ax your pardon, sir," returned one of the men. "You're pretty free with some of the rules. Maybe you kindly keep an eye upon the rest. This crew's dissatisfied. This crew don't vally bullying and maulin' spike. This crew has its right like other crews. I'll make so free as that, and by your own rules I take it we can talk together. I ax your pardon, sir, acknowledging you for to be captain at this present, but I claim my rights and step outside for counsel."
And with an elaborate sea salute, this fellow, a long, ill-looking, yellow-eyed man of 35, stepped coolly towards the door and disappeared out of the house. One after another, the rest followed his example, each making a salute as he passed, each adding some apology.
"According to rules," said one.
"Forecastle council," said Morgan. And so, with one remark or another, all marched out and left Silver and me alone with the torch. The sea cook instantly removed his pipe.
"Now look you here, Jim Hawkins," he said in a steady whisper that was no more than audible. "You're within half a plank of death, and what's so long sight worse of torture. They're going to throw me off, but, you mark, I stand by you through thick and thin. I didn't mean to, no, not till you spoke up. I was about desperate to lose that much blunt and be hanged into the bargain, but I see you was the right sort. I says to myself, you stand by Hawkins, John, and Hawkins'll stand by you. You're his last guard, and by the living thunder, John, he is yours. Back to back, says I. You save your witness, and he'll save your neck."
I began dimly to understand. "You mean all's lost?"
I asked. Aye, by gum I do, he answered. Ship gone, neck gone, that's the size of it. Once I looked into that bay, Jim Hawkins, and seen no schooner, I'm tough, but I gave out. As for that lot and their counsel, mark me, they're outright fools and cowards. I'll save your life, if so be as I can, from them. But see here, Jim, tit for tat, you save Long John from swinging.
I was bewildered. It seemed a thing so hopeless he was asking. He, the old buccaneer, the ringleader throughout. What I can do, that I'll do, I said.
It's a bargain, cried Long John. You speak up plucky, and by thunder I've a chance.
He hobbled to the torch where it stood propped among the firewood and took a fresh light to his pipe.
Understand me, Jim, he said, returning. I've a head on my shoulders, I have. I'm on Squire's side now. I know you got that ship safe somewheres. How you done it I don't know, but safe it is. Now I guess Hans and O'Brien turned soft. I never much believed in neither of them. Now you mark me, I ask no questions, nor I won't let others. I know when a game's up, I do, and I know a lad that's staunch. Ah, you that's young, you and me might have done a power of good together.
He drew some cognac from the cask into a tin cannikin.
Will you taste, messmate? He asked, and when I refused, well, I'll take a dram myself, Jim, said he. I need a culker, for there's trouble on hand, and talking of trouble, why did that doctor give me the chart, Jim?
My face expressed a wonder so unaffected that he saw the needlessness of further questions.
Ah, well, he did, though, said he. And there's something good. There's something under that, no doubt. Something surely under that, Jim, bad or good.
And he took another swallow of the brandy, shaking his great fair head like a man who looks forward to the worst. 29. The Black Spot Again. The council of buccaneers had lasted some time when one of them re-entered the house, and with a repetition of the same salute, which had in my eyes an ironical air, begged for a moment's loan of the torch. Silver briefly agreed, and this emissary retired again, leaving us together in the dark.
There's a cool breeze coming, Jim,
said Silver, who had by this time adopted quite a friendly and familiar tone. I turned to the loophole nearest me and looked out. The embers of the great fire had so far burned themselves out and now glowed so low and duskily that I understood why these conspirators desired a torch. About halfway down the slope to the stockade, they were collected in a group. One held the light, another was on his knees in their midst, and I saw the blade of an open knife shine in his hand with varying colors in the moon and torchlight. The rest were all somewhat stooping as though watching the maneuvers of this last. I could just make out that he had a book as well as a knife in his hand, and was still wondering how anything so incongruous had come in their possession when the kneeling figure rose once more to his feet, and the whole party began to move together towards the house. "Here they come," said I, and I returned to my former position, for it seemed beneath my dignity that they should find me watching them.
"Well, let 'em come, lad, let 'em come," said Silver cheerily. "I've still a shot in my locker."
The door opened, and the 5 men, standing huddled together just inside, pushed one of their number forward. In other circumstances, it would have been comical to see his slow advance, hesitating as he set down each foot, but holding his closed right hand in front of him.
"Step up, lad," cried Silver. "I won't teach you. Hand it over, lubber. I know the rules, I do. I won't hurt the deputation."
Thus encouraged, the buccaneer stepped forth more briskly, and having passed something to Silver, from hand to hand, slipped yet more smartly back again to his companions. The sea cook laughed at what had been given him.
"The black spot. I thought so," he observed. "Where might you have got this paper?" "Why, hello. Look here now, this ain't lucky." You've got to cut this out of a Bible. What fool's cut a Bible?
Ah, there, said Morgan.
There, what did I say? No good'll come of that, I said. Well, you're about fixed now among you, continued Silver. You'll all swing now, I reckon. What soft-headed lubber had a Bible?
It was Dick, said one.
Dick, was it? Then Dick can get to prayers, said Silver. He's seen his slice of luck, has Dick, and you may lay to that.
But here the long man with the yellow eyes struck in.
"Play that talk, John Silver," he said. "This crew has tipped you the black spot in full council, as in duty bound. You just turn it over, as in duty bound, and see what's wrote there. Then you can talk."
"Thank you, George," replied the sea cook. "You always was brisk for business, and has the rules by heart, George, as I'm pleased to see. Well, what is it, anyway?" "Ah, deposed. That's it, is it? Very pretty wrote, to be sure. Like print, I swear. Your hand all right, George? Why, you was getting quite a leading man in his here crew. You'll be capping next, I shouldn't wonder. Just oblige me with that torch again, will you? This pipe don't draw."
"Come now," said George. "You don't fool this crew no more. You're a funny man by your account, but you're over now, and you'll maybe step down off that barrel and help vote."
"I thought you said you knowed the rules," returned Silver contemptuously. "Leastways, if you don't, I do. And I wait here, and I'm still your cap'n, mind, till you outs with your grievances, and I reply. In the meantime, your black spot ain't worth a biscuit. After that, we'll see."
"Oh," replied George, "you don't be under no kind of apprehension. We're all square, we are. First, you made a hash of this cruise. You'll be a bold man to say no to that. Second, you let the enemy out of this here trap for nothing. Why did they want out? I don't know, but it's pretty plain they wanted it. Third, you wouldn't let us go at 'em upon the march. We see through you, John Silver. You want to play booty. That's what's wrong with you. And then, fourth, there's this here boy."
"Is that all?" said Silver quietly.
"Enough, too," retorted George. "We'll all swing and sun-dry for your bungling."
"Well, now, look here. I'll answer these 4 pints, one after another. I'll answer 'em. I made a hash of this cruise, did I? Well, now, y'all know what I wanted, and y'all know if that had been done that we'd have been aboard the Hispaniola this night as ever was, every man of us alive and fit and full of good plum duff and the treasure in the hold of her, by thunder. Well, who crossed me? Who forced my hand, as was the lawful captain? Who tipped me the black spot the day we landed and began this dance? It's a fine dance, I'm with you there. It looks mighty like a hornpipe in a rope's-ended execution dock by London town, it does. But who done it? Why, it was Anderson and Hans and you, George Mary. And you're the last above board of that same meddling crew. And you have the Davy Jones insolence to up and stand for cap'n over me. You that sank the lot of us, by the powers. But this tops the stiffest yarn to nothing."
Silver paused, and I could see by the faces of George and his late comrades that these words had not been said in vain.
"That's for number 1,
cried the accused, wiping the sweat from his brow, for he had been talking with a vehemence that shook the house.
"Why, I give you my word, I'm sick to speak to you. You neither sense nor memory, and I leave it to fancy where your mother's was to let you come to see. See! Gentlemen of fortune! I reckon tailors is your trade."
"Go on, John," said Morgan. "Speak up to the others."
"Ah, the others," returned John. "They're a nice lot, ain't they? You say this crew is bungled. By gum, if you could understand how bad it's bungled, you would see. We're that near the gibbet that my neck's stiff with thinking of it. You seen 'em, maybe, hanged in chains, birds about 'em, seamen pinting 'em out as they go down with the tide. Who's that, says one. Why, that's John Silver. I knowed him well, says another. And you can hear the chains a jangle as you go about and reach for the other buoy. Now, that's about where we are. Every mother's son of us, thanks to him, and Hans and Anderson, and other ruination fools of you. And if you want to know about number 4 and that boy, why, shiver me timbers, isn't he a hostage? Are we a-going to waste a hostage? No, not us. You might be our last chance, and I shouldn't wonder. Kill that boy, not me, mates. And number 3? Ah, well, here's a deal to say to number 3. Maybe you don't count it. Nothing to have a real college doctor to see you every day. You, John, with your head broke. Or you, George Mary, that had the ague shakes upon you not 6 hours agone, and has your eyes the colour of lemon peel to the same moment on the clock. And maybe, perhaps, you didn't know there was a consort coming either. But there is, and not so long till then. And we'll see who'll be glad to have a hostage when it comes to that. And as for number 2, and why ye made a bargain, well, you came crawling on your knees for me to make it. On your knees you came. You was that downhearted, and you'd have starved too if I had it, but that's a trifle. You look there, that's why. And he cast down upon the floor a paper that I instantly recognized. None other than the chart on yellow paper with the 3 red crosses that I had found in the oilcloth at the bottom of the captain's chest. Why, the doctor had given it to him was more than I could fancy. But if it were inexplicable to me, the appearance of the chart was incredible to the surviving mutineers. They leaped upon it like cats upon a mouse. It went from hand to hand, one tearing it from another, and by the oaths and the cries and the childish laughter with which they accompanied their examination, you would have thought not only were they fingering the very gold, but were at sea with it besides in safety.
"Yep," said one, "that's Flint, sure enough, J.F., and a score below with the clovitch to it. So he done ever."
"Mighty pretty," said George,
"But how are we to get away with it, and with us no shit?"
Silver suddenly sprang up, and supporting himself with a hand against the wall. "Now I give you warning, George," he cried. "One more word of your sauce, and I'll call you down and fight you. How? Why, how do I know? You had ought to tell me that. You and the rest that lost me my schooner with your interference burn you. But not you, you can't. You ain't got the invention of a cockroach, but civil you can speak, and shall, George Mary. You may lay to that."
"That's fair enough," said the old man Morgan.
"Fair? I reckon so," said the sea cook. "You lost the ship. I found the treasure. Who's the better man at that? And now I resign, by thunder. Elect who you please to be our captain now. I'm done with it."
"Silver!" they cried. "Barbecue forever! Barbecue for captain!"
"So that's the tune, is it?" cried the cook. "George, I reckon you'll have to wait another turn, friend, and lucky for you as I'm not a revengeful man, but that was never my way. And now, shipmates, this black spot, 'tain't much good now, is it? Dick's crossed his luck and spoiled his Bible, and that's about all."
"It'll do to kiss the book on still, won't it?" growled Dick, who was evidently uneasy at the curse he had brought upon himself.
"A Bible with a bit cut out?" returned Silver derisively. "Not it. You don't bind no more than a ballad book."
"Don't it, though?" cried Dick, with a sort of joy. "Well, I reckon that's worth having, too."
"Here, Jim, there's a curiosity for you," said Silver, and he tossed me the paper.
It was around about the size of a crown piece. One side was blank, for it had been the last leaf. The other contained a verse or two of Revelation. These words, among the rest, which struck plainly, sharp home upon my mind: "Without are dogs and murderers." The printed side had been blackened with wood ash, which had already begun to come off and soil my fingers. On the blank side had been written with the same material the one word, "deposed." I have that curiosity beside me at this moment, but not a trace of writing now remains beyond a single scratch, such as a man might make with his thumbnail. That was the end of the night's business. Soon after, with a drink all round, we lay down to sleep. And the outside of Silver's vengeance was to put George Merry up for sentinel and threaten him with death if he should prove unfaithful. It was long ere I could close an eye, and heaven knows I had matter enough for thought in the man whom I had slain that afternoon, in my own most perilous position, and above all, in the remarkable game that I saw Silver now engaged upon, keeping the mutineers together with one hand and grasping with the other after every means, possible and impossible, to make his peace and save his miserable life. He himself slept peacefully and snored aloud, yet my heart was sore for him. Wicked as he was, to think on the dark perils that environed and the shameful gibbet that awaited him. 30. On Parole. I was wakened, indeed we were all wakened, for I could see even the sentinel shake himself together from where he had fallen against the doorpost, by a clear, hearty voice hailing us from the margin of the wood. "Blockhouse, ahoy!" it cried. "Here's the doctor!" And the doctor it was, although I was glad to hear the sound, yet my gladness was not without admixture. I remembered with confusion my insubordinate and stealthy conduct, and when I saw where it had brought me, among what companions, surrounded by what dangers, I felt ashamed to look him in the face. He must have risen in the dark, for the day had hardly come, and when I ran to a loophole and looked out, I saw him standing, like Silver once before, up to mid-leg in creeping vapor.
"You doctor! Top of the morning to you, sir!"
cried Silver, broad awake and beaming with good nature in a moment.
"Bright and early, to be sure, and it's the early bird, as the saying goes, that gets the rations. George, shake up your timbers, son, and help Dr. Livesey o'er the ship's side. All a-doing well. Your patience was, all well and merry."
So he pattered on, standing on the hilltop with his crutch under his elbow, and one hand upon the side of the log house, quite the old John in voice, manner, and expression.
"We've got a surprise for you, too, sir," he continued. "We've a little stranger here. A new boarder and lodger, sir, and looking fit and taut as a fiddle. Slept like a supercargo, he did, right alongside a job, stem to stem we was all night."
Dr. Livesey was by this time across the stockade and pretty near the cook, and I could hear the alteration in his voice as he said, "Not Jim?"
"The very same Jim as ever was," says Silver.
The doctor stopped outright, although he did not speak, and it was some seconds before he seemed able to move on. "Well, well," he said at last, "duty first and pleasure afterwards, as you might have said yourself, Silver. Let us overhaul these patients of yours." A moment afterwards he had entered the blockhouse, and with one grim nod to me, proceeded with his work among the sick. He seemed under no apprehension, though he must have known that his life among these treacherous demons depended on a hair. And he rattled on to his patients as if he were paying an ordinary professional visit in a quiet English town. His manner, I suppose, reacted on the men, for they behaved to him as if nothing had occurred, as if he were still ship's doctor and they were still faithful hands before the mast. "You're doing very well, my friend," he said to the fellow with the bandaged head. "And if ever any person had a close shave, it was you. Your head must be as hard as iron. Well, George, how goes it? You're a pretty color, certainly. Why, your liver, man, is upside down. Did you take that medicine? Did he take that medicine, man?" "Aye, aye, sir, he took it, sure enough," returned Morgan. "Because, you see, since I am a mutineer's doctor, or prison doctor, as I prefer to call it," says Dr. Livesey, in his pleasantest way, "I make it a point of honor not to lose a man for King George, God bless him, and the gallows." The rogues looked at each other, but swallowed the home thrust in silence. "Dick don't feel so well, sir," said one. "Don't he?" replied the doctor. "Well, step up here, Dick, and let me see your tongue." "No, I should be surprised if he did. Man's tongue is fit to frighten the French. Another fever." "Ah, there," said Morgan. "That come of spelling Bibles." "That comes, as you call it, of being arrant asses," returned the doctor. "And now having sense enough to know honest air from poison. The dry air from a vile pestiferous slough. I think it most probable, though of course it's only an opinion, that you'll all have the deuce to pay before you get that malaria out of your systems. Camp in a bog, would you? Silver, I'm surprised at you. You're less of a fool than many, take you all around, but you don't appear to me to have the rudiments of a notion about the rules of health." "Well," he added after he had dosed them round and they had taken his prescriptions, with really laughable humility, more like charity schoolchildren than blood-guilty mutineers and pirates. "Well, that's done for today. And now I should wish to have a talk with that boy, please." And he nodded his head in my direction carelessly. George Mary was at the door, spitting and spluttering over some bad-tasted medicine, but at the first word of the doctor's proposal he swung round with a deep flush and cried, "No!" and swore. Silver struck the barrel with his open hand.
"Silence!"
he roared, and looked about him positively like a lion.
"Doctor," he went on in his usual tones, "I was a-thinking of that, knowing as you fancy the boy. We're all humbly grateful for your kindness, as you see. Puts faith in you and takes the drugs down like that much grog, and I take it I found a ways as'll suit all. Hawkins, will you give me your word of honour as a young gentleman? For a young gentleman you are, although poor born. Your word of honour not to slip your cable."
I readily gave the pledge required.
"Then, doctor," said Silver, "you just step outside of that stockade, and once you're there, I'll bring the boy down on the inside, and I reckon you can yarn through the spars. A good day to you, sir, and all our duties to the squire and Captain Smollett."
The explosion of disapproval, which nothing but Silver's black looks had restrained, broke out immediately the doctor had left the house. Silver was roundly accused of playing double, of trying to make a separate peace for himself, of sacrificing the interests of his accomplices and victims, and in one word, of the identical, exact thing that he was doing. It seemed to me obvious in this case that I could not imagine how he was to turn their anger. But he was twice the man the rest were, and his last night's victory had given him a huge preponderance on their minds. He called them all fools and dolts, you can imagine, said it was necessary I should talk to the doctor, fluttered the chart in their faces, and asked them if they could afford to break the treaty the very day they were bound to treasure hunting.
"No, by thunder!" he cried. It's us must break the treaty when the time comes. Until then, I'll gammon that doctor if I have to ile his boots with brandy."
And then he bade them get the fire lit, and stalked out upon his crutch, with his hand on my shoulder, leaving them in a disarray and silenced by his volubility rather than convinced.
"Slow, lad, slow," he said. "They might round upon us in a twinkle of an eye if we was seen to hurry."
Very deliberately, then, did we advance across the sand to where the doctor awaited us on the other side of the stockade, and as soon as we were within easy speaking distance, Silver stopped.
"You'll make note of this here also, doctor," says he, "and the boy'll tell you how I saved his life, and we're deposed for it too, and you may lay to that. Doctor, when a man's steering as near the wind as me, playing chuck farthing with the last breath in his body like, you wouldn't think it too much mayhap to give him one good word. You please bear in mind, it's not my life only now, it's that boy's into the bargain. And you'll speak me fair, doctor, and give me a bit of hope to go on for the sake of mercy."
Silver was a changed man once he was out there and had his back to his friends in the blockhouse. His cheeks seemed to have fallen in, his voice trembled. Never was a soul more dead and earnest. "Why, John, you're not afraid?" asked Dr. Livesey.
"Doctor, I'm no coward. No, not I, not so much." And he snapped his fingers. "If I was, I wouldn't say it, but I'll own up fairly. I'm the shake upon the gallows. You're a good man and true. I never seen a better man, and you'll not forget what I done, not any more than you'll forget the bad, I know. And I step aside, see here, and leave you and Jim alone, and you'll put that down for me too, for it's a long stretch, is that.
So saying, he stepped back a little way till he was out of earshot, and there sat down upon a tree stump and began to whistle, spinning round now and again upon his seat so as to command a sight, sometimes of me and the doctor, and sometimes of his unruly ruffians as they went to and fro in the sand between the fire, which they were busy rekindling, and the house from which they brought forth pork and bread to make the breakfast. "So, Jim," said the doctor sadly, "here you are. As you have brewed, so you shall drink, my boy. Heaven knows, I cannot find it in my heart to blame you, but this much I will say, be it kind or unkind. When Captain Smollett was well, you dared not have gone off, and when he was ill and couldn't help it, by George, it was downright cowardly." I will own that I began here to weep. "Doctor," I said, "you might spare me. I have blamed myself enough. My life's forfeit anyway. And I should have been dead now, by now, if Silver hadn't stood for me. And, doctor, believe this, I can die, and I dare say I deserve it. But what I fear is torture. If they come to torture me—" "Jim," the doctor interrupted, and his voice was quite changed. "Jim, I can't have this. Whip over, and we'll run for it." "Doctor," said I passed my word." I know," he cried. "We can't help that now, Jim, now. I'll take it on my shoulders, holus bolus. Blame and shame, my boy. But stay here. I cannot let you. Jump. One jump and you're out, and we'll run for it like antelopes." "No," I replied. "You know right well you wouldn't do the thing yourself, neither you nor the squire nor captain. No more will I. Silver trusted me. I passed my word, and back I go. But, doctor, you did not let me finish. If they come to torture me, I might let slip a word of where the ship is, for I got the ship, part by luck and part by risking, and she lies in the north inlet on the southern beach, just below high water. At half tide she must be high and dry." "The ship!" exclaimed the doctor. Rapidly I described to him my adventures, and he heard me out in silence. "There is a kind of fate in this," he observed when I had done. "Every step it's you that saves our lives. And do you suppose by any chance that we are going to let you lose yours? That would be a poor return, my boy. You found out the plot. You found Ben Gunn, the best deed that ever you did, or will do, though you live to 90. Oh, by Jupiter, and talking of Ben Gunn, why, this is the mischief in person. Silver!" he cried. "Silver! I'll give you a piece of advice," he continued as the cook drew near again. "Don't you be in any great hurry after that treasure."
"Why, sir, I do my impossible, which that ain't," said Silver. "I can only, asking your pardon, save my life and the boys by seeking for that treasure, and you may lay to that."
"Well, Silver," replied the doctor, "if that is so, I'll go one step further. Look out for squalls when you find it."
"Sir," said Silver, "as between man and man, that's too much and too little. What you're after, why you left the blockhouse, why you've given me that there chart, I don't know now, do I? And yet I done your bidding with my eyes shut, and never a word of hope. But no, this here's too much. If you won't tell me what you mean plain out, just say so, and I'll leave the helm."
"No," said the doctor musingly. "I've no right to say more. It's not my secret, you see, Silver. Or, I give you my word, I'd tell it you. But I'll go as far with you as I dare go, and a step beyond, for I'll have my wig sorted by the captain, or I'm mistaken. And first, I'll give you a bit of hope. Silver, if we both get alive out of this wolf trap, I'll do my best to save you, short of perjury." Silver's face was radiant.
"You couldn't say more, I'm sure, sir, not if he was my mother," he cried.
"Well, that's my first concession," added the doctor. "My second is a piece of advice. Keep the boy close to you, and when you need help, halloo. I'm off to seek it for you. and that itself will show you if I speak at random. Goodbye, Jim." And Dr. Livesey shook hands with me through the stockade, nodded to Silver, and set off at a brisk pace into the wood. 31. The Treasure Hunt. Flint's Pointer.
"Jim,"
said Silver when we were alone,
"if I saved your life, you saved mine, and I'll not forget it. I seen the doctor waving you to run for it, with the tail of my eye I did. And I seen you say no as plain as here, and Jim, that one's to you. This is the first glint of hope I had since the attack failed, and I owe it to you. And now, Jim, we're to go in for this here treasure hunting, with sealed orders, too, and I don't like it. And you and me must stick close, back to back like, and we'll save our necks in spite of fate and fortune."
Just then a man hailed us from the fire that breakfast was ready, and we were soon seated here and there about the sand over biscuit and fried junk. They had lit a fire fit to roast an ox, and it was now grown so hot that they could only approach it from the windward, and even there not without precaution. In the same wasteful spirit they had cooked, I suppose 3 times more than we could eat, and one of them, with an empty laugh, threw what was left into the fire, which blazed and roared again over this unusual fuel. I never in my life saw men so careless of the morrow. Hand to mouth is the only word that can describe their way of doing, and what with wasted food and sleeping centuries, though they were bold enough for a brush and be done with it, I could see their entire unfitness for anything like a prolonged campaign. Even Silver, eating away with Captain Flint upon his shoulder, had not a word of blame for their recklessness, and this the more surprised me, for I thought he had never shown himself so cunning as he did then.
"Aye, mate," said he, "it's lucky I have barbecue to think for you with this here head. I got what I wanted, I did. Sure enough, they have the ship. Where they have it I don't know yet, but once we hit the treasure, we'll have to jump about and find out. And then, mates, us that has the boats, I reckon, has the upper hand."
Thus he kept running on, with his mouth full of hot bacon. Thus he restored their hope and confidence, and I, more than suspect, repaired his own at the same time.
"As for hostage," he continued, "that's his last talk, I guess, with them he loves so dear. I got my piece of news, and thank ye to him for that, but it's over and done. I'll take him in a line when we go treasure hunting, for we'll keep him like so much gold in case of accidents, ye mark, and in the meantime, once we got the ship and treasure both off to sea like jolly companions, why then we'll talk with Mr. Hawkins over we will, and we'll give him his share, to be sure, for all his kindness."
It was no wonder the men were in good humor now. For my part, I was horribly cast down. Should the scheme he had now sketched prove feasible, Silver, already doubly a traitor, would not hesitate to adopt it. He had still a foot in either camp, and there was no doubt he would prefer wealth and freedom with the pirates to a bare escape from hanging, which was the best he had to hope for on our side. Nay, and even if things so fell out that he was forced to keep his faith with Dr. Livesey, even then what danger lay before us? What a moment that would be when the suspicions of his followers turned to certainty, and he and I should have to fight for dear life, he a cripple and I a boy, against 5 strong and active seamen. Add to this double apprehension the mystery that still hung over the behavior of my friends, their unexplained desertion of the stockade, their inexplicable cession of the chart, or harder still to understand, the doctor's last warning to Silver: "Look out for squalls when you find it." And you'll readily believe how little taste I found in my breakfast, and with how uneasy a heart I set forth behind my captors on the quest for treasure. We made a curious figure, had anyone been there to see us, all in soiled sailor's clothes, and all but me armed to the teeth. Silver had 2 guns slung about him, one before and one behind, besides the great cutlass at his waist, and a pistol in each pocket of his square-tailed coat. To complete his strange appearance, Captain Flint sat perched upon his shoulder and gabbling odds and ends of purposeless sea talk. I had a line about my waist and followed obediently after the sea cook, who held the loose end of the rope now in his free hand, now between his powerful teeth. For all the world, I was led like a dancing bear. The other men were variously burthened, some carrying picks and shovels, for that had been the very first necessary they brought ashore from the Hispaniola. Others laden with pork, bread, and brandy for the midday meal. All the stores, I observed, came from our stock, and I could see the truth of Silver's words the night before. Had he not struck a bargain with the doctor, he and his mutineers, deserted by the ship, must have been driven to subsist on clear water and the proceeds of their hunting. Water would have been little to their taste. A sailor is not usually a good shot, and besides all that, when they were so short of eatables, it was not likely they would be very flush of powder. Well, thus equipped, we all set out. Even the fellow with the broken head, who should certainly have kept in shadow, and straggled, one after another, to the beach where the 2 gigs awaited us. Even these bore trace of the drunken folly of the pirates, one in a broken thwart, and both in their muddy and unbaled condition. Both were to be carried along with us for the sake of safety, and so, with our numbers divided between them, we set forth upon the bosom of the anchorage. As we pulled over, there was some discussion on the chart. The Red Cross was, of course, far too large to be a guide, and the terms of the note on the back, as you will hear, admitted of some ambiguity. They ran, the reader may remember, thus: tall tree, spyglass shoulder, bearing a point to the north of north-northeast, Skeleton Island, east-southeast, and by east, 10 feet. A tall tree was thus the principal mark. Now, right before us, the anchorage was bounded by a plateau from 200 to 300 feet high, adjoining on the north the sloping southern shoulder of the spyglass, and rising again towards the south into the rough, cliffy eminence called the Mizzenmast Hill. The top of the plateau was dotted thickly with pine trees of varying height. Every here and there, one of a different species rose 40 or 50 feet clear above its neighbors, and which of these was the particular tall tree of Captain Flint could only be decided on the spot and by the readings of the compass. Yet, although that was the case, every man on board the boats had picked a favorite of his own ere we were halfway over, Long John alone shrugging his shoulders and bidding them wait till they were there. We pulled easily, by Silver's directions, not to weary the hands prematurely, and after a quite long passage, landed at the mouth of the second river, that which runs down a woody cleft of the spyglass. Thence, bending to our left, we began to ascend the slope towards the plateau. At the first outset, heavy, miry ground and matted, marish vegetation greatly delayed our progress. But by little and little the hill began to steepen and became stony underfoot, and this wood to change its character and to grow in a more open order. It was indeed a most pleasant portion of the island that we were now approaching. A heavy-scented broom and many flowering shrubs that had almost taken the place of grass. Thickets of green nutmeg trees were dotted here and there with the red columns and the broad shadow of the pines, and the first mingled their spice with the aroma of the others. The air, besides, was fresh and stirring, and this, under the sheer sunbeams, was a wonderful refreshment to our senses. The party spread itself abroad in a fan shape, shouting and leaping to and fro about the center, and a good way behind the rest. Silver and I followed, I tethered by my rope, he plowing, with deep pants among the sliding gravel. From time to time, indeed, I had to lend him a hand, or he must have missed his footing and fallen backwards down the hill. We had thus proceeded for about half a mile, and were approaching the brow of the plateau, when the man upon the farthest left began to cry aloud, as if in terror. Shout after shout came from him, and the others began to run in his direction.
"He can't have found the treasure,"
said old Morgan, hurrying past us from the right,
"for that's a clean top."
Indeed, as we found when we also reached the spot, it was something very different. At the foot of a pretty big pine tree, and involved in a green creeper, which had even partly lifted some of the smaller bones, a human skeleton lay, with a few shreds of clothing, on the ground. I believe a chill struck for a moment to every heart.
"He was a seaman,"
said George Merry, who, bolder than the rest, had gone up close and was examining the rags of clothing.
"Leastways, this is good sea cloth."
Aye, said Silver. Like enough. You wouldn't look to find a bishop here, I reckon, but what sort of way is that for the bones to lie? Tain't to nature.
Indeed, on second glance, it seemed impossible to fancy that the body was in a natural position. But for some disarray, the work perhaps of the birds that had fed upon him, or of the slow-growing creeper that had gradually enveloped his remains, the man lay perfectly straight, his feet pointing in one direction, his hands raised above his head like a diver's, pointing directly in the opposite.
"I've taken a notion into my old numbskull," observed Silver. "Here's the compass. There's the tip-top pint of Skeleton Island sticking out like a tooth. Just take a bearing, will you, along the line of them bones."
It was done. The body pointed straight in the direction of the island, and the compass read duly east-southeast and by east.
"I thought so," cried the cook. "This here is a pinter. Right up there is our line for the Pole Star and the Jolly Dollars. But by thunder, if it don't make me cold to the inside to think of Flint, this is one of his jokes and no mistake. Him and these 6 was alone here. He killed 'em, every man, and this one he hauled here and laid down by compass. Shivered my timbers. They're long bones, and the hair's been yellow. Aye, that would be Allardyce. You mind Allardyce, Tom Morgan?"
Aye, returned Morgan. "I mind him. He owed me money, he did, and took my knife ashore with him."
"Speaking of knives," said another, "why don't we find his and lying round? Flint warn't the man to pick a seaman's pockets, and the birds, I guess, would leave it be."
"By the powers, and that's true," said Silver.
"There ain't a thing left here," said Mary, still feeling around among the bones. "Not a copper do it, nor a barky box. Don't look natural to me."
"Nah, by gum it don't," agreed Silver. "Not natural, nor not nice, says you. Great guns. Messmates, but if Flint was living, this would be a hot spot for you and me. 6 they were, and 6 are we, and bones is what they are now."
"I saw him dead with these here deadlights," said Morgan. "Billy took me in. There he laid, with penny pieces on his eyes." "Dead, aye. Sure enough, he's dead and gone below," said the fellow with the bandage. "But if ever spirit walked, it will be Flint's. Dear heart, but he died bad, did Flint."
"Aye, that he did," observed another. "Now he raged, now he hollered for the rum, and now he sang 15 men were his only song mates. And I tell you true, I never rightly liked to hear it since. It was main hot, and the windy was open, and I hear that old song coming out as clear, and the death haul on the man already." Come, said Silver. "Stow this talk. He's dead, and he don't walk that I know. Leastways he won't walk by day, and you may lay to that. A care killed a cat. Fetch a head for the doubloons."
We started, certainly, but in spite of a hot sun and the staring daylight, the pirates no longer ran separate and shouting through the wood, but kept side by side and spoke with bated breath. The terror of the dead buccaneer had fallen on their spirits. 32. The Treasure Hunt. The Voice Among the Trees. Partly from the damping influence of this alarm, partly to rest Silver and the sick folk, the whole party sat down as soon as they had gained the brow of the ascent. The plateau being somewhat tilted towards the west, the spot on which we had paused commanded a wide prospect on either hand. Before us, over the treetops, we beheld the cape of the woods fringed with surf. Behind, we not only looked down upon the anchorage in Skeleton Island, but saw, clear across the spit in eastern lowlands, a great field of open sea upon the east. Sheer above us rose the spyglass, here dotted with silver pines, there black with precipices. There was no sound but that of the distant breakers, mounting from all round, and the chirp of countless insects in the brush. Not a man, not a sail upon the sea. The very largeness of the view increased the sense of solitude. Silver, as he sat, took certain bearings with his compass.
"There are 3 tall trees," said he, "about in the right line from Skeleton Island. Spyglass Shoulder, I take it, means that lower pint there. It's chance play to find the stuff now. I've half a mind to dine first."
"I don't feel sharp," growled Morgan. "Thinking of Flint? I think it were, as done me."
"Ah, well, my son, you praise your stars he's dead," said Silver.
"He were an ugly devil," cried a third pirate with a shudder. "That blew in the face, too."
"That was how the rum took him," added Mary. "Blue. Well, I reckon he was blue. That's a true word."
Ever since they had found the skeleton and got upon this train of thought, they had spoken lower and lower, and they had almost got to whispering by now, so that the sound of their talk hardly interrupted the silence of the wood. All of a sudden, out of the middle of the trees in front of us, a thin, high, trembling voice struck up the well-known air and words. 15 men on a dead man's chest, yo-ho-ho, and a bottle of rum. I've never seen men more dreadfully affected than the pirates. Color went from their 6 faces like enchantment. Some leaped to their feet, some clawed hold of others. Morgan groveled on the ground. "It's Flint, cried Mary. The song had stopped suddenly as it began, broken off, you would have said, in the middle of a note, as though someone had laid his hand upon the singer's mouth. Coming through the clear, sunny atmosphere among the green treetops, I thought it had sounded airily and sweetly, and the effect on my companions was the stranger. "Come," said Silver, struggling with his ashen lips to get the word out. "This won't do. Stand by to go about. This is a rum start, and I can't name the voice, but it's someone skylarkin, someone that's flesh and blood, and you may lay to that." His courage had come back as he spoke, and some of the color to his face along with it. Already the others had begun to lend an ear to this encouragement, and were coming a little to themselves, when the same voice broke out again, not this time singing, but in a faint, distant hail that echoed yet fainter among the clefts of the spyglass. "Darby McGaw," it wailed, for that is the word that best describes the sound. "Darby McGaw! Darby McGaw!" again and again and again, and then, rising a little higher and with an oath that I leave out, "Fetch aft the rum, Darby!" The buccaneers remained rooted to the ground, their eyes starting from their heads. Long after the voice had died away, they still stared in silence dreadfully before them. "That fixes it," gasped one. "Let's go." "They were his last words," moaned Morgan. "His last words above board." Dick had his Bible out and was praying volubly. He had been well brought up, had Dick, but before he came to sea and fell among bad companions. Still, Silver was unconquered. I could hear his teeth rattle in his head, but he had not yet surrendered. "Nobody in this here island ever heard of Darby," he muttered. "No, not one, but us that's here." And then, making a great effort, "Shipmates," he cried, "I'm here to get that stuff, and I'll not be beat by man or devil. I never was feared of Flint in his life, and by the powers I'll face him dead. There's 700,000 pound, not a quarter of a mile from here. When did ever gentleman of fortune show his stern to that much dollars for a boozy old seaman with a blue mug, and him dead, too?" But there was no sign of reawakening courage in his followers, rather, indeed, of growing terror at the irreverence of his words. "Belay there, John," said Mary. "Don't you cross the Sperrit." And the rest were all too terrified to reply. They would have run away, severally, had they dared, but fear kept them together, and kept them close by John, as if his daring helped them. He, on his part, had pretty well fought his weakness down.
Spirit? Well, maybe, he said, but there's one thing not clear to me. There was an echo. Now, no man has ever seen a spirit with a shadow. Well, then, what's he doing with an echo to him? I should like to know. That ain't in nature, surely.
This argument seemed weak enough to me, but you can never tell what will affect the superstitious, and to my wonder, George Merry was greatly relieved.
Well, that's so, he said. You've a head upon your shoulders, John, and no mistake. Well, shipmates, this here crew's on a wrong tack, I do believe. And come to think of it, it was like Flint's voice, I grant you, but not just so clear away like it, after all. It was like somebody else's voice now. It was like,
By the powers been gone, roared Silver.
Aye, and so it were, cried Morgan, springing on his knees. Been gone it were.
It don't make much odds, do it now? Asked Dick. Ben Gunn's not here in the body any more in Flint. But the older hands greeted this remark with scorn.
Why, nobody minds Ben Gunn, cried Mary. Dead or alive, nobody minds him.
It was extraordinary how their spirits had returned and how the natural color had revived in their faces. Soon they were chatting together, with intervals of listening, and not long after, hearing no further sound, they shouldered their tools and set forth again, Mary walking first with Silver's compass to keep them on the right line with Skeleton Island. He had said the truth. Dead or alive, nobody minded Ben Gunn. Dick alone still held his Bible and looked around him as he went, with fearful glances, but he found no sympathy, and Silver even joked him on his precautions.
I told you, said he. I told you you'd spoiled your Bible. If it ain't no good to swear by, what do you suppose a spirit would give for it? Not that.
And he snapped his big fingers, halting a moment on his crutch. But Dick was not to be comforted. Indeed, it was soon plain to me that the lad was falling sick. Hastened by heat, exhaustion, and the shock of his alarm, the fever, predicted by Dr. Livesey, was evidently growing swiftly higher. It was fine open walking here upon the summit. Our way lay a little downward, for, as I have said, the plateau tilted towards the west. The pines, great and small, grew wide apart, and even between the clumps of nutmeg and azalea, wide open spaces baked in the hot sunshine. Striking as we did pretty near northwest across the island, we drew, on the one hand, even nearer under the shoulders of the spyglass, and on the other, looked ever wider over that western bay where I had once tossed and trembled in the coracle. The first of the tall trees was reached, and by the bearings proved the wrong one. So with the second. The third rose nearly 200 feet into the air above a clump of underwood, a giant of a vegetable with a red column as big as a cottage, and a wide shadow around in which the company could have maneuvered. It was conspicuous far to see, both on the east and west, and might have entered as a sailing mark upon the chart. But it was not its size that now impressed my companions. It was the knowledge that 700,000 pounds in gold lay somewhere buried below its spreading shadow. The thought of that money, as they drew near, swallowed up their previous terrors. Their eyes burned in their heads, their feet grew speedier and lighter. Their whole soul was bound up in that fortune, that whole lifetime of extravagance and pleasure that lay waiting there for each of them. Silver hobbled, grunting on his crutch. His nostrils stood out and quivered. He cursed like a madman when the flies settled on his hot and shiny countenance. He plucked furiously at the line that held me to him, and from time to time he turned his eyes upon me with a deadly look. Certainly he took no pains to hide his thoughts, and certainly I read them like print. In the immediate nearness of the gold, all else had been forgotten. His promise and the doctor's warning were both things of the past, and I could not doubt that he hoped to seize upon the treasure, find and board the Hispaniola under cover of night, cut every honest throat about that island, and sail away as he had first intended, laden with crimes and riches. Shaken as I was with these alarms, it was hard for me to keep up with the rapid pace of the treasure hunters. Now and again I stumbled, And it was then that Silver plucked so roughly at the rope and launched me with his murderous glances. Dick, who had dropped behind us and now brought up the rear, was babbling to himself both prayers and curses as his fever kept rising. This also added to my wretchedness, and to crown all, I was haunted by the thought of the tragedy that had once been acted on that plateau, when that ungodly buccaneer with the blue face, he who died at Savannah, singing and shouting for drink, had there, with his own hand, cut down his 6 accomplices. This grove that was now so peaceful must then have rung with cries, I thought, and even with the thought I could believe that I heard it ringing still. We were now at the margin of the thicket.
"Huzzah, mates! All together!"
shouted Mary, and the foremost broke into a run. And suddenly, not 10 yards farther, we beheld them stop. A low cry arose. Silver doubled his pace, digging away with the foot of the crutch like one possessed, and the next moment he and I also came to a dead halt. Before us was a great excavation, not very recent, for the sides had fallen in and grass had sprouted on the bottom. In this were the shaft of a pick broken in two and the boards of several packing cases strewn around. On one of these boards I saw branded with a hot iron the name Walrus, the name of Flint's ship. All was clear to probation. The cash had been found and rifled. The 700,000 pounds were gone. 33. The Fall of a Chieftain. There never was such an overturn in this world. Each of these 6 men was as though he had been struck, but with Silver the blow passed almost instantly. Every thought of his soul had been set full stretch like a racer on that money. Well, he was brought up in a single second, dead, and he kept his head, found his temper, and changed his plan before the others had time to realize the disappointment.
"Jim," he whispered, "take that and stand by for trouble."
And he passed me a double-barreled pistol. At the same time, he began quietly moving northward, and in a few steps had put the hollow between us 2 and the other 5. Then he looked at me and nodded, as much to say, "Here is a narrow corner," as indeed I thought it was. His looks were not quite friendly, and I was so revolted at these constant changes that I could not forbear whispering, "So you've changed sides again?" There was no time left for him to answer in. The buccaneers, with oaths and cries, began to leap one after another into the pit and to dig with their hands, throwing the boards aside as they did so. Morgan found a piece of gold. He held it up with a perfect spout of oaths. It was a 2-guinea piece, and it went from hand to hand among them for a quarter of a minute.
2 guineas, roared Mary, shaking it at Silver. "That's your 700,000 pounds, is it? You're the man for bargains, ain't you? You're him that never bungled nothing, you wooden-headed lubber."
"Dig away, boys,"
said Silver with the coolest insolence.
"You'll find some pig nuts, and I shouldn't wonder."
"Pig nuts," repeated Mary in a scream. "Mates, do you hear that? I tell you now, the man there knew it all along. Look him in the face of him, and you'll see it wrote there."
"Ah, Mary," remarked Silver, "standing for captain again. You're a pushin' lad, to be sure."
But this time everyone was entirely in Mary's favor. They began to scramble out of the excavation, darting furious glances behind them. One thing I observed, which looked well for us. They all got out upon the opposite side from Silver. Well, there we stood, 2 on one side, 5 on the other, the pit between us, and nobody screwed up high enough to offer the first blow. Silver never moved. He watched them, very upright on his crutch, and looked as cool as I ever saw him. He was brave, and no mistake. At last, Mary seemed to think a speech might help matters. "Mates," said he, "there's 2 of them alone there."
One's the old cripple that brought us all here and blundered us down to this. The other's that cob that I mean to have the heart of. Now, mates!" He was raising his arm and his voice, and plainly meant to lead a charge, but then, just then, crack, 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 3 musket shots flashed out of the thicket. Mary tumbled headforemost into the excavation. The man with the bandage spun round like a teetotum and fell all his length upon his side, where he lay dead, but still twitching, and the other 3 turned and ran for it with all their might. Before you could wink, Long John had fired 2 barrels of a pistol into the struggling Mary, and as the man rolled up his eyes at him in the last agony,
"George," said he, "I reckon I settled you."
At the same moment, the Dr. Gray and Ben Gunn joined us with smoking muskets from among the nutmeg trees.
"Forward!" cried the doctor. "Double quick, my lads. We must head 'em off for the boats."
And we set off at a great pace, sometimes plunging through the bushes to the chest. I tell you, but Silver was anxious to keep up with us. The work that man went through, leaping on his crutch till the muscles of his chest were fit to burst, was work no man ever equaled, and so thinks the doctor. As it was, he was already 30 yards behind us and on the verge of strangling when we reached the brow of the slope.
"Doctor," he hailed, "see there, no hurry."
Sure enough, there was no hurry. In a more open part of the plateau, we could see the 3 survivors still running in the same direction as they started, right for Mizzenmast Hill. We were already between them and the boats, and so we 4 sat down to breathe, while Long John, mopping his face, came slowly up with us.
"Thank ye kindly, Doctor," says he. "You came in about a nick, I guess, for me and Hawkins. And since you've been gone," he added, "well, you're a nice one, to be sure."
"I'm Ben Gunn, I am," replied the maroon, wriggling like an eel in his embarrassment. "And," he added, after a long pause, "how do Mr. Silver? Pretty well, I thank ye, says you."
Ben, murmured Silver, "to think as you've done me."
The doctor sent back Gray for one of the pickaxes deserted in their flight by the mutineers, and then as we proceeded leisurely downhill to where the boats were lying, related in a few words what had taken place. It was a story that profoundly interested Silver, and Ben Gunn, the half-idiot maroon, was the hero from beginning to end. Ben, in his long, lonely wanderings about the island, had found the skeleton. It was he that had rifled it. He had found the treasure. He had dug it up. It was the haft of his pickaxe that lay broken in the excavation. He had carried it on his back in many weary journeys, from the foot of the tall pine to a cave where he had on the 2-pointed hill at the northeast angle of the island, and there it had lain, stored in safety since 2 months before the arrival of the Hispaniola. When the doctor had wormed the secret from him on the afternoon of the attack, and when next morning he saw the anchorage deserted, he had gone to Silver, given him the chart, which was now useless, given him the stores, for Ben Gunn's cave was well supplied with goat's meat salted by himself, given anything and everything to get a chance of moving in safety from the stockade to the 2-pointed hill, there to be clear of malaria and keep a guard upon the money. "As for you, Jim," he said, "it went against my heart, but I did what I thought best for those who stood by their duty, and if you were not one of those, whose fault was it?" That morning, finding that I was to be involved in the horrid disappointment he had prepared for the mutineers, he had run all the way to the cave, and leaving the squire to guard the captain, had taken Gray and the maroon and started, making the diagonal across the island to be at hand beside the pine. Soon, however, he saw that our party had the start of him, and Ben Gunn, being fleet of foot, had been dispatched in front to do his best alone. Then it had occurred to him to work upon the superstitions of his former shipmates, and he was so far successful that Gray and the doctor had come up and were already ambushed before the arrival of the treasure hunters.
"Ah," said Silver, "it were fortunate for me that I had Hawkins here. You would have let old John be cut to bits and never given it a thought, Doctor."
"Not a thought," replied Dr. Livesey cheerily. And by this time we had reached the gigs. The doctor, with the pickaxe, demolished one of them, and then we all got aboard the other and set out to go around by sea for the North Inlet. This was a run of 8 or 9 miles. Silver, though he was almost killed already with fatigue, was set to an oar, like the rest of us, and we were soon skimming swiftly over the smooth sea. Soon we passed out of the straits and doubled the southeast corner of the island, round which 4 days ago we had towed the Hispaniola. As we passed the two-pointed hill, we could see the black mouth of Ben Gunn's cave and a figure standing by it, leaning on a musket. It was the squire, and we waved a handkerchief and gave him 3 cheers, in which the voice of Silver joined as heartily as any. 3 miles farther, just inside the mouth of North Inlet, what should we meet but the Hispaniola, cruising by herself? The last flood had lifted her, and had there been much wind or a strong tide current, as in the southern anchorage, we should never have found her more, or found her stranded beyond help. As it was, there was little amiss beyond the wreck of the mainsail. Another anchor was got ready and dropped in a fathom and a half of water. We pulled round again to Rum Cove, the nearest point for Ben Gunn's treasure house, and then Gray, single-handed, returned with the gig to the Hispaniola, where he was to pass the night on guard. A gentle slope ran up from the beach to the entrance of the cave. At the top, the squire met us. To me, he was cordial and kind, saying nothing of my escapade, either in the way of blame or praise. At Silver's polite salute, he somewhat flushed.
"John Silver," he said, "you're a prodigious villain and impostor, a monstrous impostor, sir. I am told I am not to prosecute you. Well, then, I will not. But the dead men, sir, hang about your neck like millstones."
"I thank you kindly, sir," replied Long John, again saluting.
"I dare you to thank me," cried the squire. "It is a gross dereliction of my duty. Stand back."
And thereupon we all entered the cave. It was a large, airy place with a little spring and pool of clear water overhung with ferns. The floor was sand. Before a big fire lay Captain Smollett, and in a far corner, only duskily flickered over by the blaze, I beheld great heaps of coin and quadrilaterals built of bars of gold. That was Flint's treasure that we had come so far to seek, and that had cost already the lives of 17 men from the Hispaniola. How many it had cost in the amassing! What blood and sorrow! What good ships scuttled on the deep! What brave men walking the plank blindfold! What shot of cannon! What shame and lies and cruelty! Perhaps no man alive could tell. Yet there were still 3 upon that island: Silver, and old Morgan, and Ben Gunn, who had each taken his share in these crimes, and each had hoped in vain to share in the reward.
"Come in, Jim," said the captain. "You're a good boy in your line, Jim, but I don't think you and me'll go to sea again. You're too much of the born favorite for me. Is that you, John Silver? What brings you here, man?"
"Come back to my duty, sir," returned Silver.
"Ah," said the captain, and that was all he said. What a supper I had of it that night, with all my friends around me, and what a meal it was, with Ben Gunn's salted goat and some delicacies and a bottle of old wine from the Hispaniola. Never, I am sure, were people gayer or happier. And there was Silver, sitting back almost out of the firelight, but eating heartily, prompt to spring forward when anything was wanted, even joining quietly in our laughter, the same bland, polite, obsequious seaman of the voyage out. 34. And last. The next morning we fell early to work, for the transportation of this great mass of gold near a mile by land to the beach, and thence 3 miles by boat to the Hispaniola, was a considerable task for so small a number of workmen. The 3 fellows still abroad upon the island did not greatly trouble us. A single sentry on the shoulder of the hill was sufficient to ensure us against any sudden onslaught, and we thought, besides, they had had more than enough of fighting. Therefore the work was pushed on briskly. Gray and Ben Gunn came and went with the boat, while the rest during their absences piled treasure on the beach. 2 of the bars, slung in rope's end, made a good load for a grown man, one that he was glad to walk slowly with. For our part, as I was not much use at carrying, I was kept busy all day in the cave packing the minted money into bread bags. It was a strange collection, like Billy Bones's hoard for the diversity of coinage, but so much larger and so much more varied that I think I never had more pleasure than in sorting them. English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Georges and Louis, doubloons and double guineas, and moidores and sequins, and pictures of all the kings of Europe for the last 100 years. Strange oriental pieces, stamped with what looked like wisps of string or bits of spiderweb, round pieces and square pieces, and pieces bored through the middle as if to wear them round your neck. Nearly every variety of money in the world must, I think, have found a place in that collection, and for number, I am sure they were like autumn leaves, so that my back ached with stooping and my fingers with sorting them out. Day after day, this work went on. By every evening, a fortune had been stowed aboard, but there was another fortune waiting for the morrow. And all this time we heard nothing of the 3 surviving mutineers. At last, I think it was on the 3rd night, the doctor and I were strolling on the shoulder of the hill where it overlooks the lowlands of the Isle when, out of the darkness below, the wind brought us a noise between shrieking and singing. It was only a snatch that reached our ears, followed by the former silence. "Heaven forgive them," said the doctor. "'Tis the mutineers."
"All drunk, sir,"
struck in the voice of Silver behind us. Silver, I should say, was allowed his entire liberty, and in spite of daily rebuffs, seemed to regard himself once more as quite a privileged and friendly dependent. Indeed, it was remarkable how well he bore those slights, and with what unwearying politeness he kept on trying to ingratiate himself with all. Yet I think none treated him better than a dog, unless it was Ben Gunn, who was still terribly afraid of his old quartermaster, or myself, who had really something to thank him for, although for that matter, I suppose, I had reason to think even worse of him than anybody else, for I had seen him meditating a fresh treachery upon the plateau. Accordingly, it was pretty gruffly that the doctor answered him. "Drunk or raving?" said he.
"Right you were, sir," replied Silver, "and precious little odds which to you and me."
"I suppose you would hardly ask me to call you a humane man," returned the doctor with a sneer. "And so my feelings may surprise you, Master Silver. But if I was sure they were raving, as I am morally certain one at least of them is down with fever, I should leave this camp, and at whatever risk to my own carcass, take them the assistance of my skill."
"Ask your pardon, sir. You would be very wrong," quoth Silver. "You'd lose your precious life, and you may lay to that. I'm on your side now, hand and glove, and I shouldn't wish for to see the party weakened, let alone yourself, seeing as I know what I owes you. But these men down there, they couldn't keep their word. No, not supposing they wished to. And what's more, they couldn't believe as you could."
"No," said the doctor. "You're the man to keep your word. We know that." Well, that was about the last news we had of the 3 pirates. Only once we heard a gunshot a great way off and supposed them to be hunting. A council was held, and it was decided that we must desert them on the island, to the huge glee, I must say, of Ben Gunn, and with the strong approval of Gray. We left a good stock of powder and shot, the bulk of the salt goat, a few medicines, and some other necessaries, tools, clothing, a spare sail, a fathom or 2 of rope, and, by the particular desire of the doctor, a handsome present of tobacco. That was about our last doing on the island. Before that, we had got the treasure stowed and had shipped enough water and the remainder of the goat meat in case of any distress. And at last, one fine morning, we weighed anchor, which was about all we could manage, and stood out of North Inlet, the same colors flying that the captain had flown and fought under at the Palisade. The 3 fellows must have been watching us closer than we thought, for as we soon had proved, for coming through the Narrows, we had to lie very near the southern point. And then we saw all three of them kneeling together on a spit of sand with their arms raised in supplication. It went to all our hearts, I think, to leave them in that wretched state, but we could not risk another mutiny. And to take them home for the gibbet would have been a cruel sort of kindness. The doctor hailed them and told them of the stores we had left and where they were to find them. But they continued to call us by name and appeal to us, for God's sake, to be merciful and not to leave them to die in such a place. At last, seeing the ship still bore on her course and was now swiftly drawn out of earshot, one of them, I know not which it was, leapt to his feet with a hoarse cry, whipped his musket to his shoulder, and sent a shot whistling over Silver's head and through the mainsail. After that, we kept under the cover of the bulwarks, and when next I looked out, they had disappeared from the spit, and the spit itself had almost melted out of sight in the growing distance. That was at least the end of that, and before noon, to my inexpressible joy, the highest rock of Treasure Island had sunk into the blue round of sea. We were so short of men that everyone on board had to bear a hand. Only the captain lying on a mattress in the stern and giving his orders, for though greatly recovered, he was still in want of quiet. We laid her head for the nearest port in Spanish America, for we could not risk the voyage home without fresh hands. And as it was, what with baffling winds and a couple of fresh gales, we were all worn out before we reached it. It was just at sundown when we cast anchor in a most beautiful land-locked gulf, and were immediately surrounded by shore boats full of Negroes and Mexican Indians and half-bloods selling fruits and vegetables and offering to die for bits of money. The sight of so many good-humored faces, especially the blacks, the taste of the tropical fruits, and above all the lights that began to shine in the town made a most charming contrast to our dark and bloody sojourn on the island. And the doctor and the squire, taking me along with them, went ashore to pass the early part of the night. Here they met the captain of an English man-of-war, fell in talk with him, went on board his ship, and, in short, had so agreeable a time that day was breaking when we came alongside the Hispaniola. Ben Gunn was on deck alone, and as soon as we came on board he began with wonderful contortions to make us a confession. Silver was gone. The maroon had connived at his escape in a shore boat some hours ago, and he now assured us he had only done so to preserve our lives, which certainly would have been forfeit if the man with the one leg had stayed aboard. But this was not all. The sea cook had not gone empty-handed. He had cut through a bulkhead unobserved and had removed one of the sacks of coins, worth probably 300 or 400 guineas, to help him on his further wanderings. I think we were all pleased to be so cheaply quit of him. Well, to make a long story short, we got a few hands on board, made a good cruise home, and the Hispaniola reached Bristol just as Mr. Blandley was beginning to think of fitting out her consort. 5 men only of those who had sailed returned with her. Drink and the devil had done for the rest, with a vengeance, although, to be sure, we were not quite in so bad a case as that other ship they sang about. With 1 man of her crew alive, what put to sea with 75. All of us had an ample share of the treasure and used it wisely or foolishly, according to our natures. Captain Smollett is now retired from the sea. Gray not only saved his money, but being smit with the desire to rise, also studied his profession, and he is now mate and part owner of a full, fine, rigged ship, married besides, and the father of a family. As for Ben Gunn, he got £1,000, which he spent or lost in 3 weeks, or to be more exact, in 19 days, for he was back begging on the 20th. Then he was given a lodge to keep, exactly as he feared upon the island, and he still lives, a great favorite, though something of a butt, with the country boys, and a notable singer in church on Sundays and Saint days. Of Silver we have heard no more. That formidable seafaring man with 1 leg has at last got clean out of life, but I dare say he met his old negress, and perhaps still lives in comfort with her and Captain Flint. It is to be hoped so, I suppose, for his chances of comfort in another world are very small. The bar Silver and arms lie still, for all that I know, where Flint buried them, and certainly they shall lie there for me. Oxen and wain ropes would not bring me back again to that accursed island, And the worst dreams that ever I have are when I hear the surf booming about its coasts, or start upright in bed with the sharp voice of Captain Flint still ringing in my ears. Pieces of 8. Pieces of 8. End of Treasure Island.